very hot when they come off the arena. Let them cool down a bit before you get too close. More blue smoke, so we know we've got another diesel coming in, and in this case it's one of the classics of the war. Although the theme this year is primarily British tanks, we thought it was only fair to let you see what other people were doing to some extent. This is one of the great classics of the Second World War, the Russian T-34. Now, compared with anything you've seen so far, this thing is crude. I mean, rough and ready just ain't in it, but that was part of the Russian philosophy. They were built in huge numbers. They even eclipsed the quantity of Shermans that were built. For some reason it's taken the grass. Whether that means it's about to break down or not, I don't know. Let's keep our fingers crossed. T-34, like the British Crusader and Comet, features the Christie suspension because the Russians had to purchase the Christie concept and design many of their tanks around it. It's a very simple design. It's powered by a V12 diesel engine, which again was a strange thing in its day. It is hard work to drive. Everything is totally manually driven. What is interesting about T-34, I think probably sets it aside from almost any other tank in the Second World War, is that when it was built, it had a smallish turret with a 76mm gun. But by the time that model appears, sort of towards the end of the war, 43, 44, they've rebuilt the tank to take a larger turret, rather like they did with the Sherman, and a much bigger gun, an 85mm weapon, which was probably a match for some of the heavy German stuff. But in the end, as I said with the Sherman, it's quantity that does it. There was just no way that the number of Panthers or Tigers built were ever going to match or stop armour on the scale the Russians were producing them. And when you realise that during the invasion of Russia, when the Germans came in during Operation Barbarossa, the Russians realised how vulnerable their factories were to invasion. They actually moved most of their tank factories a further 2,000 miles into Russia, rebuilt them, and then started producing tanks and outproduced everybody. To give you some idea of the Russian commitment and achievement. The other thing that, of course, distinguishes T-34, people make a lot of fuss about, is the sloped armour. It's sloped all round, and sloped armour generally will give you better protection than vertical armour of the same thickness, although it has to be said that you'd have to hit the thing absolutely square on to take advantage of that. Now, I rather suspect that this is the tank most of you have come to see. It's a pity that I've forgotten what it is, but anyway, we'll just have a quick look at my notes. This, of course, is the Mark I Tiger, the Tiger I, probably the most terrifying tank of the Second World War. It cost us a few shillings to get it running again, but it is lovingly looked after by our staff. As far as we know, it is the only operational Tiger in the world at present, although I don't think that will be the case forever. And I think even looking at it now at this distance, you get some idea of the horror that must have gone through the hearts of not just British, but American, Canadian, Russian, French, Polish tankers who had to come up against this thing in combat. They first appear on the Russian front during the fighting around Leningrad. The British Army first encounters them in Tunisia in 43, which is where this particular tank was captured. The armour on the front was 100mm thick, which made it virtually invulnerable to any known anti-tank gun on our side at that time. The gun is a high-velocity 88mm gun, basically the same as the anti-aircraft gun the Germans were using. And it's not just that that gun is big and powerful. In German, it is linked to very high quality optics, so the sights are good. And you may very safely say that what the gunner in the Tiger sets his sights on, he will hit. And the odds are, if he hits it, he'll destroy it. Taking them out, on the other hand, by firing at them with British and American tanks was a very hit-and-miss affair, quite literally. The only handicap for the Tiger in this respect is that it had to stop in order to fire. The weight and power of the gun is such that if you try to fire one thing on the ring, you probably wreck the tank. The other problem they had was, of course, the great weight. It was 56 tons, which in those days was considered massive. and the suspension system, which uses torsion bars that run across the floor of the tank and work in a twisting motion for springs. It meant that they had to have loads of extra wheels. If you go right up close to it, again when it's parked up and cooled down, and count the wheels down each side, you'll find they're overlapped and interleaved with one another to spread that great weight as much as possible. People tend to say that the Tiger's sluggish, but in fact it's got a reasonable acceleration. And quite frankly, no matter how fast or slow it's going, it's just not something you want to meet coming round the corner if you're in a Sherman. One thing I ought to add, and I think it's a great misconception, the engine in the back of that tank is petrol. No German tank of the Second World War had a diesel engine in it. Well, armoured car did, but none of their tanks. The engine in the back of that Tiger is a Maybach V12 petrol engine, and similar engines were used in all the German tanks from, say, the Panzer III onwards. So if anyone tells you that German tanks were powered by diesel engines, you can tell them from me, they're wrong. So there it goes, the mighty Tiger, and be parked up shortly, so if you want to go and have a closer look, you can do so. In fact, with a bit of luck, it'll be parked up next to the Panzer III, and you can make a couple of comparisons of how the German designs improved. On the other side of the that area, by the hedge, which I can't see through, there is also a Panther tank. Right, the next range of vehicles are coming up with a wheel, and they'll be out in a few minutes once.
Yeah, that's the problem, there's a whole field.